The second type of residual analysis is to identify outliers and influential observations. An outlier is a data point that is unusual compared to the remaining data. So, for example, if you look at the graph here, so most of the points are clustered around here, and there is one that is kind of outside the rest of them. So this would be considered an outlier. So one way of identifying outlier is to plot a scatter plot of the dependent variable on the y-axis, independent variable on the x-axis, and look for points that stay outside or away from most of the other points. And you can also look at the standardized residuals for each of those points, and any standardized residual that is large in the absolute value, then that would also indicate that that particular observation is an outlier. So what do you do if you have outliers? Well, there are three possibilities. An outlier may represent an erroneous data. So you check for any typographical errors, and if that is so, then correct the error. Or the outlier may signal that the model assumption is not true. So if the data is not erroneous, then one possibility is that the model that we assumed, that is a straight line model, beta sub 0 plus beta sub 1 x plus the error term, that model needs to be revisited, and maybe you should try a different model. And if that is also all right, then outliers may simply be unusual values that sometimes occur at random by chance. You have to accept that that is a genuine outlier, and then you cannot throw it out. You have to keep it in the analysis. All right, now let's look at an example in Excel. This is an example from figure 14.16 and table 14.11. So here we have x values and y values. So first thing to do is to prepare a scatter plot and then visually examine to see whether there is any unusual point in the scatter plot. So with x as the first column and the y-axis in the second column to the right, you can highlight the range like this and do a scatter plot. Now you have to clean up the formatting here. Now if you examine the plot, you can see that most of the values are around here, and there is one value which is kind of sticking out up here, and this is probably an outlier. It could be. We need to check this out. So that is 3 and 75. So this observation could be an outlier. So to identify that, we need to look at the standardized residuals. So we can run a regression analysis and generate standardized residuals. Select regression. Now y range, x range. Okay, check label. Let's put the output here, and we will request standardized residuals. We don't need anything else for this analysis. Now if you go to the bottom and you have the predicted y residuals and the standardized residuals, we can add another column, say outlier. Now how many standard deviations you want to set as a threshold for outliers? So number of standardized residuals for outliers. Say we want to use 2. Then we can use an if function to identify the outliers. So if the absolute value of the standardized residual is greater than or equal to that number, that we need to make that absolute reference. So if it is greater than or equal to 2, then it is an outlier. So we'll call the outliers R. Otherwise, we'll just put a dash. So as we suspected, this observation is an outlier. It has a standardized residual greater than 2. At this point, we have to see whether there is any error in typographical error in the data, or is it a genuine data point, or is there a different model that we can use. And these are the ways in which we can mitigate outliers.